Welcome to Static Members Part 2, and in Part 2 I'm going to continue what we started building in Part 1, but this time, as opposed to working with static functions like we did in Part 1, I want to introduce the idea of static data members to you. Now this is really interesting. I'm going to create an integer up here that's called number objects. Alright? Now what's really interesting is I'm going to come back to the front of it, and you guessed it, I'm going to put the word static there. Now what I just created is an integer called NBR, or number objects, that is going to be available and updatable by every object that is instantiated from this class, or whenever I'm calling this thing statically from the class. Alright, so best way to see this is to come down here, and we'll first use it as by instantiating objects, because I want you to see the results of what you just did. Okay, so I'm going to take C1. Let me make this a little easier for you to understand. I'm going to call C1 number objects, right, and I'm going to set it to 2, and then I'm going to come down here and take C2 number of objects, and I'm going to set it equal to 15. Alright, now before I actually use this in my integer main, I will need to initialize it, and so I'm just going to do number objects, and I will set that equal to 0 to begin with. Okay, I could have done it inside here, but I'll do it out here. Alright, now what's going to happen here is I've set number objects to 2 with this object, this instantiation of cat C1. Then I created another object C2. Now these are two separate objects in memory, but they're both using the same variable here, if you will. Okay, because notice I set C1 to 2, C2 to 15, and now if I just output, and I'll copy this, if I output this and output C1 dot number objects, you will notice that C1 is now equal to 15. Okay, because 15 overwrote 2. So let me compile this and let's go take a look at it. Now keep in mind we're going to return a 20 here because we're getting 8 and 12 the first time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is clear this off, run static example, and sure enough there's our 20 from this adding 8 and 12, but then there's 15. And notice I printed out C1 number of objects, and right here I had set C1 equal to 2, but then when I put it to 15 it overwrote it, because that static object or that static integer up there is available to anybody. But we could do some really neat things with this. First thing let's do is, what if we were to count the number of objects that we ever have out there in memory? Alright, so if I create a constructor, and if you remember how to do a constructor, you see what I'm doing. If you don't, go out and take a look at the videos on constructors. But all I'm going to do is put in here number objects, and then I'm just going to increment each time. Alright, now notice that before I started to run my program, I initialized it to 0. Alright, and every time I create a new instance of class, number objects is going to get incremented by 1. Alright, and so what I'm going to do here is do cat C1, cat C2, cat C3, probably see a pattern developing, cat C4. Okay, and now I am just going to come down here and I am going to use that. I need colons instead of semicolons there, okay, for a number of objects. Alright, and let me add something there to make this a little easier. There are that many cat objects. Not open, let's say in memory, and I'll close that. Alright, now if I got all that straight and easy to read, we're going to see we have instantiated 4 objects. Alright, and so let's run this, compile it, and then we'll jump out, actually execute it, and see what we get. Okay, and there we go. Notice there's our 20 from our 8 and 12 up here. I add these, but notice there are 4 in memory, right? Because that's what we created. Alright, so let's take 2 of these off, and then let's recompile, and we'll go out and run the static example again, and you'll notice there are now 2 in memory. So it's actually counting the objects that we have in memory. This example was done specifically to let you know, can I do static variables in my classes? Yes, you can, but you got to understand that these things persist and are shared across all the objects that are created by this cat class. Now, while that's a warning, that's also a great tool that you can pull out of your developer toolkit from time to time and persist certain pieces of data, counts, that sort of thing, totals across multiple classes. You have to be very, very careful with this. Very easy to lose control of it and to kind of hurt yourself, okay, with logic errors. But I wanted you to see a little bit about these static members. Some pretty cool stuff here.